The rusty blue pickup truck looked painfully out of place among the rows of polished black luxury cars lined neatly outside the towering glass headquarters. Its paint was chipped, one side mirror was cracked, and a faded child's car seat was visible through the back window. Inside, a half-eaten granola bar sat on the dashboard beside a stack of engineering blueprints held together by a rubber band. 20 minutes later, the truck was hooked to a tow line and dragged away under the direct order of a sharply dressed CEO who had taken one glance at it and decided its owner did not belong anywhere near her building. What she didn't know was that within the hour, the same executives who nodded along to her every command would be rushing through marble hallways in panic, desperately asking one question no one expected to hear that day. Where is the man who owned that truck? Daniel Brooks had not planned for his morning to begin with humiliation. At 37, he already carried more than most people could see. His eyes held the permanent tiredness of someone who had learned to function on too little sleep and too much responsibility. He was a single father raising his 6-year-old daughter, Ava, after losing his wife in a car accident 3 years earlier. Since then, life had become a carefully balanced system held together by schedules, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. Every morning started before dawn. Daniel packed Ava's lunch, braided her hair badly, but with determined concentration, signed school permission slips, and made sure she smiled at least once before dropping her off. Only then did he begin his own day. Money was always tight. His wife's medical bills had consumed nearly everything. The mortgage was barely manageable. The truck he drove had belonged to his father before him and had long since become more necessity than transportation. It rattled when idling, leaked a little oil, and groaned loudly every time he turned sharply. But it still ran, and Daniel needed it to run. Today was supposed to change everything. For months, he had been consulting quietly on a high-level infrastructure systems issue affecting one of the largest technology logistics companies in the state. The company had spent millions trying to solve a software-hardware integration crisis that was bleeding money by the hour. Multiple consultants had failed. Internal teams were stalled. Daniel had solved it, not fully yet, but enough to become essential. He had been invited for a closed-door strategy session with the board that morning. A real opportunity. A contract large enough to stabilize his life, fix the truck, stop checking his bank balance before buying groceries, and finally breathe. He arrived 10 minutes early. That should have been a good sign. Instead, his truck immediately attracted the wrong kind of attention. Outside the sleek headquarters stood Olivia Kine, CEO of Kane Dynamics. At 44, she was known for precision, discipline, and ruthless standards. Her tailored white blazer looked as sharp as her expression. When she noticed Daniel's aging truck parked near the executive entrance, her face hardened. In her mind, appearances reflected standards, and standards reflected competence. Competence did not arrive in dented pickup trucks. Without verifying ownership or checking visitor lists, she instructed building security to have the vehicle removed immediately. By the time Daniel exited the building after checking in at reception, the truck was already halfway onto a tow platform. For a moment, he simply stared, not angry at first, just stunned. That truck was more than transportation. It was how he got Ava to school, bought groceries, reached freelance clients, and visited his wife's grave. He jogged toward the tow vehicle to explain, but security intercepted him with professional politeness sharpened into dismissal. Rules were rules. Daniel stood there helplessly as his truck disappeared down the street. A familiar pressure built behind his ribs, the quiet, exhausting humiliation of being judged before being known. He looked at his watch, meeting in 15 minutes. No truck, no way to leave afterward, and now no emotional energy left for corporate theater. So he did what single parents do best. He swallowed the frustration, adjusted his wrinkled button-down shirt, and walked back inside. The boardroom on the 32nd floor was all polished glass, abstract artwork, and carefully controlled temperature. Around the table sat executives worth more money than Daniel could meaningfully imagine. No one looked impressed by him. At first, he took his seat silently, notebook in hand. Olivia entered moments later, composed and efficient, not yet connecting him to the truck outside. The meeting began. Within 10 minutes, the atmosphere changed. The board presented updated crisis projections and loss forecasts. Then they turned to Daniel. And Daniel started speaking. Not dramatically, not arrogantly, just clearly and calmly, with the quiet precision of someone who deeply understood every flaw currently costing the company millions. He mapped failure points no one else had identified, explained architecture conflicts in language both technical and practical, and outlined a phased recovery model so elegant that several executives physically leaned forward. Questions came rapidly. Daniel answered every one without hesitation or bluff. The room dynamics shifted visibly. This was no struggling freelancer hoping for approval. This was the person holding the missing piece everyone else had failed to find. Olivia's posture changed first, then her expression. Then came the realization, the visitor badge, the timing, the face. This was him, the truck owner, the man whose vehicle she had ordered removed less than an hour earlier. A flicker of discomfort crossed her features. Meanwhile, Daniel continued presenting as if nothing had happened. No bitterness, no passive aggression, just pure, undeniable competence. By the end, silence filled the room. Not only had Daniel identified the core system's issue, but his proposed solution could save the company an estimated $48 million over the next fiscal year. A board member asked the most important question. What would it take to secure Daniel's exclusive partnership before competitors approached him? That was when everything accelerated. Executives who had barely acknowledged him 30 minutes earlier were suddenly attentive, urgent, and eager. Offers were discussed. Contract terms floated. Retention packages mentioned. Then Daniel quietly closed his notebook. "I need to leave soon to pick up my daughter from school," he said. There was a problem, however. His truck had been towed. The room froze. Several heads slowly turned toward Olivia. No one needed clarification. The story assembled itself instantly. The CEO's face lost color. This was no longer an embarrassing mistake. This was a catastrophic leadership failure unfolding in real time. Within seconds, the room dissolved into coordinated damage control. A board member stood. Another called security. A third was already on the phone trying to locate the towing company. Olivia approached Daniel personally. For the first time all morning, her confidence looked shaken, not by power, but by perspective. She offered a real apology, the uncomfortable human kind. Daniel accepted it with calm restraint, not because it didn't hurt, but because bitterness would not help him reach Ava on time. An hour later, Daniel's truck was returned, washed, refueled, and parked directly outside the building entrance. Several board members personally accompanied him downstairs, not out of ceremony, but out of respect. The same rusty blue pickup truck now stood in front of the gleaming glass doors like an accidental monument, a reminder that worth is rarely visible at first glance. 3 weeks later, Daniel signed a long-term consulting agreement with Kane Dynamics worth more money than he had earned in the previous 5 years combined. He paid off lingering debts, started a college fund for Ava, and repaired the truck instead of replacing it, not because he couldn't afford a new one now, but because some things carry history that money cannot replace. Months later, employees still told the story, not as gossip, but as a lesson about assumptions, humility, and how easily brilliance can be overlooked when people mistake polish for value. And every morning, Daniel still drove the same blue truck, only now with a little less stress in his shoulders and a little more peace in his smile.